All right, let's trace what is, without a doubt, one of the most consequential journeys in all of human history. And what's wild is it didn't start with a massive army or a powerful empire. Nope, it all began with a single family and a really strange command that would, believe it or not, end up reshaping our entire world.
So it all kicks off with this single command given to a man named Abram, who's just living his life in Mesopotamia. I mean, really try to put yourself in his shoes for a second. Your life is stable, it's predictable, and then, out of nowhere, this unseen voice tells you to just leave, to abandon everything, your home, your family, your entire culture, and go to someplace that hasn't even been named yet. I mean, talk about a leap of faith. This is way more than just moving house. It's stepping off a cliff into total uncertainty.
And you've got to get this. This wasn't just about packing up and moving to a new country. This was a complete, radical break from everything he knew. And to really grasp just how revolutionary this was, we have to look at the kind of world and the kind of gods that he was walking away from. See, back then, the gods of Mesopotamia were, well, local. They were tied to certain cities, specific temples. Their power didn't really extend beyond their zip code, you could say. They were static. But the God who spoke to Abraham, this was something completely different. This God wasn't stuck in a temple, didn't have a physical statue, and, this is the big one, this God could travel with you. It was a placeless, universal God who spoke not through idols, but through words. A total game changer. And that brings us to maybe the most important idea of all, the covenant. What's a covenant? Well, think of it like a binding contract. This wasn't just a God barking orders. This was a God entering into a personal, two-way agreement. Now, in a world where gods were seen as distant and frankly pretty unpredictable, the idea that the divine would make a personal promise to a regular person, that was unheard of. A promise of countless descendants and a land just for them? Wow. This single idea, this contract, would become the absolute foundation of their entire identity. Okay, so this incredible promise is on the table, but here's the thing you have to remember. It's not passed down through a line of perfect, saintly figures. Not at all. It's carried forward by a really human, seriously flawed, and honestly an incredibly relatable family. And that story continues with Abraham's son. Now, the story of Abraham and the near sacrifice of his son, Isaac, it's a tough one, right? It's deeply unsettling. But if we look at it in its historical context, it's actually marking a huge ethical shift. You have to remember, this was happening in a part of the world where child sacrifice was a real thing. It was seen as the ultimate act of devotion. But this story, it ends with a ram being sacrificed instead. It draws a line in the sand, establishing a new rule. Our God doesn't demand the lives of our children. The covenant is sealed not with violence, but with an act of mercy. All right, so the promise moves on to Isaac's son, Jacob. And let me tell you, Jacob is complicated. He's no straightforward hero. His name literally means to deceive or to supplant, and boy, does he live up to it. First, he convinces his starving brother Esau to trade his entire inheritance, the birthright, for a bowl of stew. Then he dresses up to trick his own blind father into giving him the blessing that was meant for Esau. This guy isn't about brute force. He's a trickster who gets what he wants through pure, unadulterated cunning. So Jacob has to flee, of course, and he spends years in exile. But eventually, he heads home, and he is terrified of facing the brother he cheated. And on the night before this reunion, the weirdest thing happens. He gets into an all-night wrestling match with some mysterious figure. It's this epic struggle. He doesn't exactly win, but the key is he hangs in there, he doesn't give up. And as the sun comes up, the stranger gives him a new name, Israel. And this new name defines everything. It means he who wrestles with God. It's a new identity, one that isn't about easy faith, but about a constant, gritty struggle. So from this one man, Israel, a nation starts to form. He has 12 sons, and that number, 12, is going to be the blueprint for everything to come. And it's amazing. This family tree literally becomes the organizational chart for the entire nation. Each one of those 12 sons goes on to found a tribe. And each tribe has its own destiny laid out. The tribe of Levi, they become the priests. The tribe of Judah, that's where the kings will come from. And then there's one son, Joseph, and his story is going to turn everything upside down. So now, the spotlight swings dramatically over to Jacob's favorite son, Joseph. His life story is this incredible epic, and it's basically the bridge that explains how this whole clan, this budding nation of Israel, winds up leaving the land they were promised and moving to the global superpower of the day, Egypt. I mean, Joseph's life is just a wild roller coaster. One minute he's the favorite son, the next he's sold into slavery by his own jealous brothers. He works his way up, stays true to his values, and what happens? He gets framed and thrown into prison. But it's in that prison that his uncanny ability to interpret dreams gets noticed. This talent takes him all the way from the dungeon to the throne room, right in front of Pharaoh. He ends up saving the entire country from a devastating famine, and he's promoted from prisoner to prime minister of Egypt. Just wow. So, just like he predicted, the famine hits hard. And who shows up in Egypt, begging for food? His brothers, the very same ones who sold him. And they have to bow down to this powerful Egyptian official with no idea it's him. The drama! But in this incredible moment of forgiveness, Joseph reveals who he is. And instead of taking revenge, he uses his power to save them. He moves his entire family, all 12 tribes, down to Egypt, settling them in the best, most fertile land. He saved his people, for sure, but in doing so, he also set them up for a very, very long stay in a foreign land. And for a long time, everything was great. For generations, they lived as honored guests. But empires have short memories. Centuries pass, a new pharaoh comes to power who has no idea who Joseph was. And he looks out and sees this huge, growing population of Hebrews, and he doesn't see friends. He sees a threat. And that fear turns into policy turns into oppression, and pretty soon, the descendants of Israel are no longer guests. They're slaves. But even in this darkness, a hero's story begins. A Hebrew baby, Moses, is saved from being killed and, in a crazy twist of fate, ends up being raised inside Pharaoh's own palace. Talk about irony. So you've got this man living between two worlds, Hebrew by birth, Egyptian by upbringing. He eventually has to flee into the wilderness, and it's out there that he has an encounter with that very same God of Abraham, the one who travels, this time in a burning bush. And the mission is crystal clear. Go back and set your people free. What happens next isn't just a bunch of random catastrophes. You have to see the 10 plagues for what they were, a theological smackdown, a battle of the gods. Each plague was a targeted strike against a specific Egyptian god. The Nile, which they worshipped as a source of life, it turns to blood. Frogs, a symbol of fertility, they become a disgusting plague. They even took on the big guy, the sun god, Ra, blotting out the sun with total darkness. This was a step-by-step, systematic takedown of Egypt's entire belief system, a massive cosmic flex to show who was really in charge. And then, of course, you get the grand finale, the Exodus. Pharaoh's army is breathing down their necks, they're trapped against the sea, and then the waters part. This moment becomes the single most important event in their history. It hammered home that core belief. Our God isn't stuck in a building. Our God is out here, in the real world, moving with us, and intervening in history to free slaves. It was the ultimate proof of a God on the move. But, getting free is one thing. What comes next is actually the hard part. I mean, think about it. You've got this huge group of people who've only ever known slavery. They're traumatized. How do you possibly turn them into a functioning, self-governing nation? Well, the answer to that massive challenge would be found out there, in the middle of nowhere, in the desert. So, at Mount Sinai, Moses delivers the 10 Commandments, and it's really worth looking at how they're set up, because this isn't just a random list of do's and don'ts. It's basically a constitution. The first few commandments, they're all about their relationship with God. You could call that their vertical agreement. But the rest of them, they're all about their relationships with each other, the horizontal agreement. Don't murder, don't steal, honor your parents. It's a blueprint for building a society, plain and simple. Which brings up a big question. Why on earth did a journey that should have taken maybe a few weeks end up lasting 40 years? Well, this gives you the answer. It was never about the travel time. It was about education time. It was a long, slow, deliberate process of transformation. An entire generation that had grown up with a slave mentality needed to pass on to make way for a new generation that was born in freedom and who grew up learning to live by this new set of laws. So the key takeaway here is that they weren't just wandering aimlessly for 40 years. Think of it more like a nation-building boot camp. Out there in the desert, they were learning what it meant to be a people. They were learning to live together under a shared set of rules, and they even built a mobile headquarters for their community, the Ark of the Covenant, which just kept reinforcing that central idea of a God who was on the journey with them. They were being hammered and shaped into a real nation. And so after all that time, after that complete transformation, they're finally there, standing on the edge of the Promised Land, a whole new generation, born free, ready to go in. But
Their journey is far from over. In fact, they're about to face their biggest identity crisis yet. They've been shaped into a nation ruled by God's law, but they're about to enter a land filled with nations ruled by kings. And that raises a huge question, one that will define their entire future. Who's going to rule us now? God or a king like everybody else has?